What I want to do is talk today a little bit around the one-page plan, and it's important to really talk about the one-page plan as something that pulls together a couple of different aspects. One of them is really around business alignment, which we'll get into first, some performance consulting or doing some performance improvement with the organization, the maturity model, so how you look at your organization from the standpoint of how mature are you as a business and how do you continue to drive your L&D business. And then lastly is around the metrics and measurement. And really the one-page plan incorporates all of those different things into a plan that you can easily share with the business. So what I want to do is start off first with something that came out of a Burson study back in 2015 that is really, I think, should be surprising to all of us, that really only 8% of CEOs have insight into the impact of L&D. And really, what is the value that we provide? So every dollar that they put into L&D, can they see the value that's being provided back to them? And if they don't see that, so 92% of them don't see that, then we are not doing a good job as business leaders within L&D to help them better understand how we're helping really drive the business and drive the best asset that the business has, which is their people. Why is it really critical to demonstrate the strategic business alignment? And this is something that we talk about a lot, of saying, why should we align to the business? Why is it important? We're there to make sure that the people are ready to be able to do these types of things, but it goes beyond that. It goes really to how can you truly be a business partner? You need to first team with really everybody inside the organization. So everybody inside of your organization really needs to team with everybody inside of all of the different groups that you support. That will help the organization be able to really identify and help solve those strategic business issues that arise on a regular and consistent basis, and give you insight into what's going on, not only from the high-level strategic, but also from the tactical level. What are the day-to-day things that are really helping or hindering the business from achieving what it needs to achieve, and so that you can help get ahead of that curve with the business. Really focusing on performance consulting. So looking at not just providing training, not just providing learning, but really looking at it as to how you can provide business solutions to the organization beyond just training. So learning is not always the solution. There are a lot of other performance interventions that can be put into place, but really to be a true learning partner and to align to the business, you really need to be able to say, here are the types of things that we can do to help beyond learning and development. The other part of it is realizing that you're there as a strategic asset to the business. You're a service to the business. Your job is to help ready the company's most valued asset, which are all their people, to help them be ready for whatever changes are happening, whatever strategic goals and objectives are happening. That is our ultimate goal, and it's to help them be able to consume whatever type of learning, whatever type of performance improvement, the way that they would like to consume it. So we need to be everywhere all the time to be able to help them do those things. Also realizing that we're there with the business to walk with them and partner with them on their strategic journey. So it's not just something that we meet with them in the beginning or meet with them when they already have the decision made, but really making sure that we are there through in the initial aspect of it and really with them throughout the entire journey. So to be a true partner with them as they go through their strategic journey. And then lastly is really proving it. So it's not just important to talk the game, but it's really also to prove the strategic value that you provide back to the business. And that is really through providing those business metrics, and it's not the metrics that we typically think about from an L&D standpoint of just, instead it's looking at what are the business metrics of the stakeholders that we're looking to support, what do they find important, and how do we tie to them? We'll talk about more of that here in just a little bit. So you want to make sure that you are as active and engaged in the strategic planning process as possible to really ensure alignment. So when you are looking at, especially now that we hit towards the end of the year, most of the people that you support, the key stakeholders that you support, have already started to go through the process. They've already identified from the CEO, from the leaders, senior leadership inside the organization, what the 3 to 5 strategic initiatives are for next year, and then each of those division heads, each of those different senior leaders are now starting to break apart those strategic initiatives into what that means to them and how they're going to contribute to that. So for you to be in step with them, you really need to, one, identify who it is you truly support and really what level you truly support. So you want to rise up as high as you can inside the organization so that you can be their peer-to-peer. You need to identify what their strategic goals are. So as they start to decompose and break apart what the strategic goals mean to them, you need to be there alongside of them. And then it's taking a look at how do you, once they do that and they've identified their projects, their programs, their internal initiatives, really how are you going to support them? So how are you going to align L&D to support those strategic goals and objectives? So what types of ways can you help influence? What types of ways can you help accelerate the programs that they currently have in place? As we get into this a little bit more, we're going to start talking about really identifying what are the quarterly goals, what are the metrics and measurements, and really what are your internal goals and objectives. And we'll talk more about that as we go through this. But the quarterly goals are important. I'll pause here for a second. Those are critically important because typically if you're not looking at kind of a 90-day sprint that your team has, what will typically happen with any type of business case or business plan is people will start to look at it probably mid-third quarter and realize that they are sorely behind in everything that they need to do. So this will make sure that it stays in focus, that you can break things up into sizable chunks and really hold people accountable, and both inside your organization as well as who you're partnering with within the organization, understand how those things work together. Why really the one-page plan? People always ask, why are we doing one-page plan? Typically, if I give this presentation to a larger audience, I'll ask people, how many people have read through your business case that's been put out by senior leadership? And it's pretty rare that people will raise their hand. What this does is it really takes that business case and it boils it down and says, here are the baseline details. Here's kind of the bullet points of what we are from L&D committing to the success, to help with success of the business goals and objectives. It acts as that communication vehicle for you, not only externally but internally, to talk about what's important to the business, to the business as a whole, but then also the L&D business internally. It really does align the L&D staff to a common goal and how they truly contribute to it. So it's important that when people talk about that they don't really understand how they align to the larger goals and objectives of the organization, this allows them to be able to see very specifically what they're working on and how it helps drive the business moving forward. And really, most importantly, it holds your organization accountable to those shared business results. That is absolutely critical as you go through this, because now you're holding your team accountable to true business results. There are your efficiency measures that you have internally. Are they producing good things? But how effective are those? And that's really where you start to tie them to the business results, is identifying how effective are the things that you're producing for the business. So we're going to talk about each of these different sections here, and we're going to start breaking them apart. I've added in some additional components as we go through this to start to explain a little bit more about how these things are done, because my job as I go through this is to make it sound really easy, and it's not. Putting together your one-page plan does take time. It takes the commitment not only that you have internally to drive this through, but then also how well you can partner with the business. So the first thing you really need to think about is really, who are your stakeholders? It sounds like a very simple question, but who are the true people that you support? So from the leadership team standpoint, so who in the leadership team do you support? Is it the CEO? Is it the VP of customer service? Is it operations, sales? Who is, and you have to put a name to that person, because that's the person you're going to want to interact with on a regular basis to ensure that you're aligned with exactly what they see as their strategic initiatives inside of their organization, and you have to align to them to show that success. Your internal team members. This is really where you start to look at, as you start to cascade the one-page plan across the entire organization, who are the stakeholders from your team members. So you have to really look at who are you supporting internally. So this can be, your head of instructional design, could be your design and development head, could be your deployment, your LMS. I mean, all those people could be in there. And then lastly, and to make sure that you never lose focus of it, is who are the customers that you support? Who are those end users that you support? If you are somebody who supports external organizations or external parts of the business. So we do have clients that will support not only their internal but also external. This is also a good place for you to put that information in there. But it is critical that you never lose sight of who your end user is. So because you want to be able to take who from your leadership team and who the customers are to make sure that that whole thing ties through from what is the strategic initiative that your leadership team wants and needs, and what is the true performance need that those end users or your end customers need. As you start to understand what are the organizational key initiatives or the key strategic initiatives within the organization, you start to understand where the resources are going to be spent throughout the year. This will help you be able to identify what are the most important things that the organization has moving forward, and how do you tie into those. This will allow you to get in early, to get in the conversation in the beginning, instead of hearing about something later on or after the first quarter or those types of things where you're asked and pulled in late. So if you understand those things early in the process, where the money is being allocated, one, it will help you be able to better align with them. Two, it also allows them to be able to put the appropriate resources towards the learning solution or the performance solution that needs to be put into place. So this helps you get in there a little bit early. As well as helps the stakeholders understand the investment that they need to make in learning, in the performance, to make their strategic goals and objectives work. And also, you probably need to go to find what the business case is. So there's typically a business case or business cases that are put together that the senior leadership will go through to identify what their strategic goals and objectives are. It's important that you read through those. I would say make sure that you're not getting ready to go to bed before you start to read those, but make sure you read through those, because it will talk really about what is the real reason behind this, what are the true goals and objectives that they're trying to accomplish, and give you insight as to where things are heading from the organizational standpoint. This will also help you as you look down to the L&D key initiatives to start to say, what are the key initiatives that we need to have? So how do I align the activities within the learning and development to help support those organizational initiatives? How do I start to prioritize those things? But then secondly is, you have to start to look at, can we currently support, do we have the skills, do we have the relationships, do we have the right vendor partners to be able to support the future needs of the organization? Because if you start to understand where the business is going, you can then start to understand what are the skills, capabilities to be able to move the business forward. How do you get to talk with the senior leadership, or how do you get them to start to share those things with you? And this really gets around inserting or implementing a performance consulting approach. And this allows you to be able to go to the business to understand what it is that they need first off, and be able to ask the right questions to get the information that you need, but then more importantly, be able to come back to them with the solutions that you are recommending to the business, and then mutually agree to those. So really training, and so let's talk about really kind of performance consulting here. Will be the next point of conversation. Is, often what we'll do is we'll create the solution before we truly understand what is needed. So it allows us to be able to take the time to understand what's needed, to understand where things are heading, why things are heading in a certain direction. And it allows us to partner with the business, so that way we're not blamed when performance doesn't change or improve. So it's important that we partner early so that we can do the types of things that we need. So when we look at the panacea is typically learning. So everybody says whenever there's a problem, there's a need, there's something going on in the business, the first lever everybody wants to pull is learning and development. So everybody needs training. So let's dunk them into the pool of knowledge, and everything will be okay. When you start to implement a performance consulting approach, what you're doing then is you're looking at things outside of just that learning and development. You're starting to look at what are the knowledge and skills that are necessary. Are there knowledge and skills that are the true performance gap? Is it systems? Is it technology? Is it process? So you start to look at really the entire system, the entire ecosystem in which the end user operates, to really help identify what is the root cause, or what is the true issue that is causing the problem, so that you can consult back with the senior leadership or your stakeholder to say, learning may not be the end objective here. There are some other things that need to be looked at, and learning can be a portion of that, but really here are the things that you need to look at because this will help you get the lift that you're looking for. So when you start to look at the overall kind of the performance improvement or the performance consulting methodology, you want to look at, there's really 4 key components. First is to really do a performance investigation. So really looking at doing an analysis as to really what is the true performance issue that's going on, and really do a root cause diagnostic. What is causing the major issue? What is the illness that's being caused? So don't try to mask it over, don't try to cover it up, but really dig in deep to say these are the types of things that are really causing the issue that need to be fixed. And that training isn't always the solution because, again, I go back to, if we do a training intervention or some type of learning intervention and it doesn't get the results that they need, well, then training is ineffective. Well, training is ineffective because it's not the right solution. So your root cause analysis or your diagnostic wasn't correct. Then you want to come back with what are some solutions that you can generate. So, what are some ideas, what are some things that can be done that may be inside the influence of L&D, maybe outside the influence of L&D. And then coming back to the senior leadership or your stakeholders, say, hey, here's the types of things that we recommend, and here are the types of things that we think that you should be looking at, not only now, but in the future. And then ultimately, what that would allow you to do is start to align each of those different initiatives that are in place and how L&D is going to help support those initiatives. So the next thing what we want to get into is really kind of the key performance indicators. How can we prove that we have achieved the goals that we wanted to achieve? So there's going to be organizational KPIs, and then there's going to be L&D KPIs. Those are really two different sets of KPIs. So what we'll talk about here on the next slide is so that you can better understand really the difference. There's kind of 4 different sets of metrics that you want to look at and you want to measure. There's your efficiency, there's your effectiveness, there's your outcome measures, and then there's your alignment. Each of these will be different and utilized differently. Some of them will be used only important to you running your business. So a lot of the efficiency pieces are very important to you as an L&D leader to make sure that your business is running as efficiently as possible. But then you start to look at effectiveness and outcome measures. Those are things that are really more important to the business. So you have separate sets of initiatives that need to be done. So when you look at your efficiency, so these are training activity metrics. So just to give you some examples of the different things that are in there, like the number of learners that attend training, the number of programs delivered, how much does it cost to produce training, what is your utilization rates, all of those types of things. Effectiveness really focuses on kind of the Kirkpatrick levels 1 through 3. Not quite the ROI. What's the quality of the content? Did they acquire the knowledge that they can put back on the job? What's the performance impact back to the organization? Outcome measures are really, these are the business metrics that it has. How did learning impact the results of the business? So, just a couple of things here. So revenue, cost reduction, speed to performance, all of those types of things when you look at really kind of the core measurement components that are there. The alignment, those are metrics that show the activities that match the stakeholder and business goals. So the stakeholder satisfaction, you want to make sure that you're aligning to what they need. The NPS scores that are in place, so to truly have an NPS score, so that you know that you're in alignment with what's going on with the business. So each of these has different types of end users that you need to be aware of as you go through this. When we're talking about putting together your one-page plan, you're really going to be focusing, when you're talking about your internal L&D, you're going to be talking really about your efficiency, a little bit of your effectiveness, and your alignment scores. When you're talking about aligning with the business itself, that you're going to be talking a little bit about your effectiveness and your outcome to make sure that you are really aligned well to what the business is trying to achieve. So let's go through an example. Identifying really how L&D will support the strategic goals and initiatives at the beginning. So this is not a backward-looking thing. I know a lot of times we get to the end and people will say, so how did we do? but we didn't set up the measurement metrics up front. So this is something that you need to negotiate up front with your stakeholder to better understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. As an example, so we have strategic goals. So let's say there's a new product offering, there's an ERP implementation, and they want to increase revenue by 15%. What you would do is you would go you would go to the head of sales and marketing, and you would sit down and talk with them to say, given that we are trying to increase revenue, one of the strategic goals that we have as a business is to increase revenue by 15%. What are some of the strategic initiatives that we need to have that you're going to be implementing to achieve that goal? Well, then they start to tell you that there's a new CRM system that's being put into place. They're going to increase the sales team. There's going to be a new sales incentive program. There's a new marketing and ad campaign, customer retention program. What then you need to do is ask them what they think each one of those strategic initiatives, what percentage of that will help that to get to that 15% lift. That's important because as you start to look at your performance solutions, you want to be able to tie into each one of those, because later on you're going to say, based on what we discussed, based on your percentages, here's how we've contributed to that overall goal and objective that you have. So as an example, so let's say you're rolling out the new CRM system. So we're going to use that one as an example. So some of the performance solutions, put a couple in here. I know there's many other ideas that many of you have, but so for performance solutions, we talk about, well, we're going to be implementing some e-learning, some mobile performance support, some coaching toolkits, create some communities of practice. We have communications and best practice sharing. There's, and on and on and on, all these different things that could be done to help with that new CRM system being rolled out. What you then want to do is this is the part where you have to take ownership of a certain percentage of what the lift is going to be. So when you look at this, you say, now what is our success measures? So we are going to take, based on this, so that's worth 3%. So let's say we're going to take 1% of that 3% that you're saying is going to be influenced based on what we do and how well we do what we do from an L&D standpoint. The measures need to be agreed on in advance with the stakeholder, and those measures really need to be, and I would highly recommend, that they are off of their scorecards. And it may not be the top line metrics that they have, but it can be the metrics that make up those top line scores. So how do you know what the influencers are? How do you understand how the metrics work? That's critically important so that as you understand how to influence those as you roll out a performance solution, to make sure that you are really driving the right performance, you're driving the metrics in the right direction. The reporting should be done on a standard cadence. It should be done either monthly or quarterly, and it should be a shared commitment to the business. This is something that if you can identify what are the metrics that you're going to measure up front, where those metrics are going to be coming from, and it's from a trusted source from the stakeholder, and you define what their commitment is to L&D and what L&D's commitment back to them is, then you have somebody sitting next to you at the table as you discuss the results, instead of taking your time defending the results and where did you get that information from and how did you do those things. Now you have a business partner instead of somebody who's sitting across the table. So one page, let's talk about the organizational capability. One of the things that often gets lost as we start to go through this process is you align to the business, you look at what you're strong at, but typically what happens is people will either focus on where they need improvement and they forget about their strengths. They've never really assessed what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, and really continuing to say what are not only the initiatives that we're supporting for the business, but what are our internal capabilities that we're taking a look at. One of the things that we do is we have what we call our maturity model. The way that we look at this is it's truly a structured way to assess the gaps within the organization and keeping everybody focused on business value. You see at the center is everything that you drive towards is around business value. And we focus that then, we have really 3 pillars of excellence that are around there. So from a strategic excellence, financial excellence, and operational excellence, those are the things that you really need to focus on. And then outside of that ring, you look at the 7 core capabilities to facilitate making sure that you're really focusing on the right things. Now I'm going to go through each one of these a little bit quickly, but it'll make sense to how you start to focus on those things. The model underneath, I'm going to go over some of the different dimensions that are in there, but just from a high level, just to give you understanding of where we're talking. So when you talk about the strategic excellence, we're really focusing on the organizational structure and the business alignment. What you're going to see is how each of these things tie together. So we'll talk about business alignment, and typically what we'll ask people is, hey, are you aligned with the business? And inevitably the answer back is, oh yes, we're absolutely aligned with the business. Fantastic. Then can we see your forecast and demand plan for the business? And they don't have that information. So you start to see how each of these things start to tie together, because if you don't have your forecast and demand planning, you're going to have a difficult time with your finance and planning, your organizational structure. Is your process aligned the right way? So all these things start to really interact and intertwine together. But when you look at from an organizational structure standpoint, is your organizational design the right way? Is your team management and support appropriately? Do you have your operating principles in place? Business alignment, so your stakeholder and customer engagement, your business planning, your communications. So your communications piece, I always stop here and really stress the communications is absolutely critical. You are a services business, so you are there to service the organization, and it's critical that they understand on a regular cadence what are the services that you offer. Why should they work with you instead of somebody else? There's been studies that have been shown that there is more L&D money spent outside of the L&D organization than inside the L&D organization. And I think that ties directly back to, are you aligned to the business, and are you readily communicating with the business, saying that here are the types of things that we can do, and here's the successes that we've had when people engage us in the strategic goals and objectives. So when we start to get into learning technology, so this is the infrastructure, the development tools and software, data collection, reporting, you have to be careful with the learning technology piece and really understanding where the business is heading. I know that we as learning people tend to get distracted by the new things that come out in the space and want to test and try out the new pieces. But really, there has to be an assessment first before you start to do that intake to identify, does it make sense to the business? Is it going to help us and the business achieve what it wants to achieve? And if it doesn't align, that's okay. You don't have to really go after each of the different new technologies or the new theories that are out there, but really do an assessment prior to engaging in those types of discussions. So process excellence, do you have your SOPs or your standard operating procedures in place? Is there adherence? And quality management is a big piece. So do you have a quality assurance team? Is your team aligned to providing quality, but is there somebody holding the rest of the organization to a quality standard that you have inside the business? Measurement and evaluation, so what are the key performance indicators and metrics? How are you measuring continuous improvement? How are you reporting back to the business? All of those things are important. So as you go through this process, you want to make sure that when you're looking at this is that you're not just focusing on your strengths. So you want to identify what your strengths are, and it's important that you understand what those are so that way you can continue to focus on those and continue to invest in those. If you don't, those will become opportunities later. Then also you have to really be able to take a hard look in the mirror and say, what are the L&D opportunities that we currently have? What do we need to get better at? Where can we rent that talent for a period of time? How can we acquire that skill? What do we need to do to get better at those certain areas, because we know that's where the business is starting to move forward. And then creating those additional initiatives in there to say, how are we going to, as an organization, improve ourselves? What are our internal strategic initiatives so that we can continue to help the business achieve their strategic initiatives? We talked about really looking at the quarterly priorities. It's critically important that you set these quarterly priorities and you go back to them on a regular basis. This will ensure that your team is active and engaged and aligned with the business and with really where you're heading. Because not every strategic goal, and I would hope the strategic goals, don't just take 90 days. So how do you take those larger strategic goals and initiatives that are in place and break them into chunks inside of your organization that may take one or multiple people inside of your organization to be able to drive those internally, but really so that you can show incremental success and have that interim goal and checkpoints to make sure that you are going to achieve those key initiatives. that you're on track or off track. You know early. So if you start to become that you're off track, what do you need to do in the subsequent quarter to get yourself back on track so that you can get ahead of the curve? It also helps you communicate to the internal stakeholders really around where you're at, given what their strategic goals and objectives are. And if something shifts, you can then quickly go back and adjust each of your quarterly goals and initiatives. If something slides, if something happens, so you know what you need to speed up, slow down, and what you need to shift to continue that alignment. But it also then cascades that focus. So now you're starting to put names of those different quarterly priorities within your organization to hold them accountable for achieving those goals and objectives. So it gets everybody aligned, it gets everybody focused as to where you're heading. And these are things, again, the quarterly priorities are both internal and external priorities that you have with the business. So the business scorecard, when we look at really the financial management section here, this is really you start to take everything and pull it all together. This is all the different things that we've talked about up to this point, and really put it into a quick dashboard. Now this shouldn't replace ongoing dashboards that you have with your stakeholders. This is really for those very high-level conversations that you have from a program or an initiative standpoint. As you start to go down deeper into those are things that you need to have individual dashboards and tracking around to ensure that those individual programs are being attended to or have the right resourcing that they need, and you're really achieving the goals that you want. But what this does is it details the agreed upon business priorities, business targets, and how L&D is going to contribute. So it talks all about those things in just this quick dashboard. So it allows you to sit down with the strategic leader to say, your stakeholder, to say, here are the things that we're committing to. Here are the things that we will work with you on, and here is really the benefits of you working with us from an L&D standpoint of engaging L&D early. Here are the benefits that you're going to realize. Here's how we're going to help you be successful. It also, again, aligns the staff to the business goals and expectations, so everybody understands what you're trying to accomplish within the year. There's no surprises as things are going on. People understand what's important and what's not important. And again, these can be shifted and aligned as you meet with the stakeholder on a regular basis, on a regular cadence. But then it also allows you for reflection analysis post-implementation of a program. I think we spend a lot of time just putting things into overdrive, and we're constantly running. And instead of having that moment of when the results come in, when the project is over, everybody high-fives each other or wipes the sweat off their brow, but really to be able to take that time to reflect on what did we do well, what could we do better next time, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to improve internally, how can we improve our interactions with the business and with the stakeholders. So this allows you that opportunity to be able to look at all of those things and be able to reflect back on where you've been and the journey that you've gone through together, and allow you to have those good business conversations around how do we get better together. The financial management portion is you look at what are those business priorities that they currently have in place, the business targets that they have. So this is typically where we talked earlier on about the metrics and measurement, is what are their targets that they have. So we initially talked about from implementing a new CRM is part of this doing the sales lift or an ERP implementation. They're expecting a 15% lift in something. So whether it's performance, whether it's some type of financial component, what is it that the business is looking for? What is that lift that they're looking for? How is that stakeholder being measured to be successful by their superior? That's important for you to identify. Then the next thing on there is what is L&D saying that they're going to take on? So in this case, we look at the first one. So there's an ERP implementation. The business target is 15%. L&D says, hey, you know what? We're going to take on 7% of that 15% because of all the great things we're going to do to help you and help the business achieve those goals through communications, change management, learning and development, performance support, all those different things. We're really going to help that ERP implementation be unbelievably successful. Then what is the projected benefits of really including L&D? So that 7%, again, you go back to the business case to identify what is it that they're looking to do and then you identify what are the projected benefits. This is a good time if you have never spent time with your accountants or finance. It's a great time to get a really good friend there because they will be able to convert that over to you into what does that mean from a monetary standpoint. Percentages are great. Monetary standpoint, better. So you look at what are the overall projected benefits of including L&D. And then lastly, this is where you get to do your reflection is, did you meet that target or not? So where did you fall short? So in this case, in this example that we gave across is, we originally said the benefits were going to be $25 million to the business, and it ended up being $23 million. Well, why is that? What happened? So you can then go back and start to do some of that self-reflection to really identify how you could do things better. What could you do differently? Or at the end of it, what is it that you need to do ongoing to make it better, to continue to kind of evolve the solution that you put into place? Because you may have put something in place, you see the quick lift, but now how do you continue to drive that performance throughout? So leveraging the one-page plan also requires that you really cascade it across the entire L&D organization. So to have that action beyond just the core leadership team, your core leadership team. So we have found the best results happen when you start to cascade it through the organization. So when you have your one-page plan, you provide that then to the next level and have them really look at what the strategic goals are, not only for the business, but also from the L&D standpoint. And then they go through that same exercise to say, here's how I'm going to contribute. Here's how I'm going to start to break apart those things. And then it starts to cascade down through the organization. So everybody from the facilitator to the instructional designers to the performance consultants, they can all align with, I understand my contribution, what my contribution is to the overall goals and objectives of the business. I'll use an example outside of L&D. There was an organization that was trying to be able to really lift up how quickly they recognized revenue. That was their big push. And so the person who was at the reception desk said, well, I have no idea how I can help this out. Well, what they did is when they started to kind of cascade that whole thing through the organization, what they found out is that receptionist would receive the checks, and they would be sitting on her desk for a couple of days until they were then sent over to bundled up and sent off once a week to the bank. So what they found out is if they wanted to recognize revenue faster, what she could do is either on her way home or on a lunch break or some other type of break, actually go to the bank and drop off those checks sooner, which helped them recognize revenue faster. So she understood how she could contribute to really the overall goal. It was a small contribution, but it was still an important contribution to the business. So the other benefit is it focuses everybody on the same goals and objectives. It puts everybody on the same page. And it can be really truly leveraged as what is the true north with the stakeholders and also the internal L&D. So where are you heading? Where are you going, and truly why? It helps them understand the why are they doing the things that they need to be doing. And then lastly, I think this is probably the most important, is it aligns L&D with the business goals and really helps you share in the results. One of the things that is vitally important as we go back to that initial slide that I had, where only 8% of the CEOs really truly understand the value that's being provided by L&D, by their investment in L&D. What this allows you to be able to do is really let them understand that you're on this journey with them together. You want to share those results, and it allows you to really, as an L&D organization, when you do something well, to be able to take credit for it and to spike the football and to shine the light on you. To say, we have done great things. Here are the excellent things that happen when you engage L&D at the right time, at the right level. Here are the tremendous results we can have. And I'll leave you with this one last piece. We had a client of ours, we were sitting in a meeting, and one of the senior leaders looks over at the L&D leader and was sitting in, we're getting ready to discuss a new program that was being, strategic program that was being implemented. And the senior leader pointed over at the L&D leader and said, now listen, all of you need to include that person because I don't really know what they do, but every time I include them, the results are phenomenal. So that, I thought, was probably the highest compliment that an L&D leader could ever get, because it's not important that they understand what you do. What they understand is, from a business perspective, that you are a business partner. And when they include a business partner in the conversation, that you produce unbelievable business results. All right, so we have time for a couple of questions here. The first one that's come in is asking, are you recommending that this one-pager should be refreshed each quarter or more frequently than that? I really think it depends on the business. I would say it should be refreshed at least quarterly. So you should at least meet with your stakeholders on a quarterly basis. As you start to go down in the organization, things change typically more quickly because you start to get more tactical in nature. So from a strategic standpoint, those high-level strategic conversations, those typically don't move as fast as what's happening from a tactical standpoint. So I would say you want to report on the cadence that the stakeholder wants you to report on, but it's also important that you report to them and that you reaffirm that those things are happening. So I would say at least quarterly, and then really identify what the cadence is with that stakeholder, if they want it more often or less often. But then underneath that is the people that report to you. They should be working with their peers to really revalidate some of those strategic goals and initiatives to ensure that you're aligned with those. Quantifying that ROI contribution and measuring the actual seems to be the biggest challenge. No, this would be a session on its own, but I think this is where most of us struggle. Actually, absolutely. There has been a big push inside the industry right now for us to be able to provide tangible metrics. It's a process by which, and I'll kind of briefly explain a little bit of the process in the beginning. So the process itself, you have to really start to focus in on what is it that you want to measure. So don't look at your organization. Don't look at what you have capability of measuring. You want to look at what is it that you want to be able to view and to measure, and what are the business actions that you're going to take when things fall out of the range. Because if you're not going to take business action on certain things, then those are just things that you want to monitor. But the things that you want to manage, you want to make sure that you have actionable intelligence when something happens or falls out of range. Once you have that, then what you want to do is turn internally into your organization to really identify, are we aligned the right way? Do we have the capability to report out on these things? And if you don't, then what are the things that need to be done inside the organization so that you can start to tickle out the metrics that you need? Now, typically what will happen is you'll have a series of different metrics that you're going to have for a period of time, different dashboards that you'll have. So you'll evolve over time. So going to kind of the ultimate end state in one big jump can be too jarring for a lot of people. So really you want to have a couple of interim steps in between. Once you know that you're running optimally, you have your efficiency metrics in place, then what you want to do is start to really implement some of those performance consulting pieces to understand what's important to each one of your stakeholders. Begin by understanding what's on their dashboard and what are the metrics that make up that dashboard, without getting deeper into all of that and really having a longer term discussion. That's kind of the beginning. So I always tell people, make sure your house is in order first. Start tracking some of those metrics, those external metrics internally, to make sure that you get it right before you start sharing that externally with your external stakeholders. So practice internally first, and then start to share those things with a friendly stakeholder. They'll give you some ideas of how to tweak those, how to adjust those to make sure that they're just right. But it is important that you take the time to kind of work through each one of those. And it can be very, it takes time to get those right as you go through that process. What role does the ROI Institute's methodology have on the one-page learning plan? So the ROI Institute, what we did is we really looked at, kind of from a business standpoint, what a one-page plan looks like from a business standpoint. So instead of looking at ROI, we can argue kind of how you measure ROI. Do you actually put in all of the metrics that you should, the opportunity cost, all those types of things in there? What we pivot towards is really, instead of kind of the return on investment, you really start to look at what is the business value as defined by your stakeholders. So what are the business metrics that you're driving? And then that will help tell you what really the return on investment is, but really more so what is the business impact that you have on the organization. And that ultimately that's more important. I think ROI has gotten a little bit of a black eye because of some of these outrageous numbers that come up saying, we've improved the ROI is 400% or 300% or 10,000%. I've seen numbers kind of all over the place, and so instead of, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes when they see that, but if you really look at and narrowing the focus to say the stakeholder is being measured this way, they're using these measurement components to look at success or failure, and then you look at really what is it that how you can align to those, or what are the things that really make up those different pieces. The last question I have here is really around how difficult is it, and how long does it take to actually roll this through the organization? I think it takes some initial planning up front to really pull the plan together and really think through the plan. And as the learning leader, this is something that you have to do your homework on. You have to really look at the business cases. You have to look and talk with senior leadership and feel okay to walk into the room and sit down with them and make an appointment and ask them really what's on their mind, where are they heading, what are they doing, to start to gather that data. What we've seen, once you start to pull these things together and you present this one-page plan to them, it's something that the business understands. They absolutely understand what a one-page plan is. They understand how it works, why it's there, and it will really speak to them to say, you get where we're heading, you get what we're doing, and now let's further have that business conversation. When you start to cascade it down through the organization, that's where you're going to have to take the time to teach your folks really some of that business acumen that I think a lot of organizations really need to spend some time on, is really what does that mean, how do they do those types of things. So it's spending the time teaching them the business acumen, teaching them the language of business, teaching them what the stakeholder metrics are and why they're important to them, and how you can start to influence those. Those are things that are absolutely critical, really, not only from the standpoint of can you provide back to the business the results that they're expecting, but then also to get the entire organization to speak the language of business. And that is absolutely critical. You have to be able to sit down as a business partner, talking the language of business, and then apply your craft as necessary.